So I think we're just going to open this up. If you've been reading your program, if you look at the lobby material, you know that the process for creating this play is a little different than is typical. So there's a lot that I'm sure any of them are happy to talk about. The process, the trip to Dublin that we had with this play, or the play itself, which I'm sure may have raised a few questions for a few of you as well. So I think with no further introduction, let's do a couple opening words. Nope. If you want him to talk, you have to ask a question. I'm looking for hands. Yeah.
I thought it was just absolutely exciting, just exciting, and the scenery, and when that went to red when the blood thing happened, I'm like ah! Oh my goodness! And then when the dad ran behind and it was green, and you could see the river was going in the distance. I loved it when it changed from the little blue thing to the water rushing in the background. It was just wow, thank you. This was neat.
Thank you so much.
I detect no question, but I like all those things.
How did you like doing it?
Well, maybe I'll ask Martin, because there were some things different about this production from what he'd seen previously at Smock Alley. One thing is, this back wall is, we've replicated the back wall of Smock Alley, which was our back wall, obviously, for that production, but we, through a little theater magic, were able to make our theater extend further back at moments when it was particularly theatrically powerful, we thought. So maybe...
With lots of, I mean, I know lots of this production, but lots of it new, and things like the fact that the back opens up when she dies and the birds gather, the leaves, you know, when the clockwoman throws up a handful of leaves and we move into the scene and the leaves begin to fall, just all those little stitching, imaginative things that take an idea, just expand and literally take it out for miles out behind and just open up the space and open up, because we're all committing when we're watching to creating the world in our imaginations. These people are helping us to create. So when they really go the extra mile and it really helps us to completely believe in it, it's really fantastic. It's wonderful. So way to go, the production team on that work. Great stuff.
Anyone else? Yeah.
Yes. When you first got the, when you first knew you were commissioning a play and were writing it for this group, every playwright, when they write a play, they have something to say. Well, I'm curious to know, what was that thing you wanted to say? Like, what was that in the beginning? Like, what did you have rolling around?
Good. I mean, it's an interesting question, because often in the past, working in projects like this, I've tried to come up with a big theme in the sense of a political and moral issue, and it's less so. It's certainly less political here, and in fact, I didn't write it as clearly, I think, as the cast and Neil in the work managed to reveal it. Talking in circles, it'll eventually become obvious. Very often, if you make something very overt in the language of the play, the audience feels like they're being hit over the head with the bloody thing, and they back off. And so often what you have in a first draft, you try to conceal afterwards, so that the playing will represent it and the audience will understand it through the playing rather than through being told. And this person, this character, is on a journey towards truth, trying to find the truth. And if there's a message in this play, it is about living your truth. And that wonderful moment when Elodie, as the owl comes and reaches into her heart and claws out the truth so that everybody will be healed. That's the absolute core of the play for me, because it gets at it gets at the core of what writing is about too. It gets at the core of the illness within the family, and it's just a wonderful theatrical moment. It's a fantastic moment. But that's truth. Be truthful, look for the truth, find the truth, live your truth, be true to yourself in every possible way. I think that's the strongest message the play can have.
Thank you. Yeah.
So there's a question for the cast, any or all of you. At some moment early on, you learned you were all going to be birds. So what was your reaction to that? What, you must have had some, this must have come as something of a surprise. Not completely off the wall, but no, not a bit. Were you be birds all the time?
At the before the school year even started, and one day, Patrick Sutton, who had come to do this workshop for us, he told us, everyone come in, and I want you to bring bird costumes, and you're going to be birds. Don't disappoint me. So we came in, and everyone had bird costumes of various degrees of birdness. Some of them were like literal birds, and some of them were like, I have sticks for wings. And, Patrick obviously loved it. Like, we did this exercise for 45 minutes where we were just birds up here, and then we did it the next day, and we all were kind of like, oh man, there's gonna be birds in this.
He didn't tell you why you were doing this.
No.
And he certainly didn't know why either. I mean, there was no planned script per se. It was a, yeah, I think it was an exercise about, you know, exploring physicality, loosening up, sort of throwing off those inhibitions. Right? It was that sort of exercise, but it just went. He found it so fascinating and thought it went so well that he had to bring it back, and it seemed inevitable afterward that they'd show up in the play somewhere.
And as we were talking about earlier on, the devising process, it wasn't a process of trying to lay down a straight line path for a particular play. It was a process of trying to play with people and ideas and costumes and props so that you have a rich amalgam of possibilities. And so that makes my job challenging, yes, but also easier, because I've got a wealth of possible material to take from the work these people have done and to try and feed back to them so that they're getting back stuff that they know is theirs, that's familiar, but it's shaped now into plot and narrative and so on. And then they took it and ran with it a little bit more and filled in some gaps and added on some bits and made some things truer and more beautiful and then brought it to Ireland, and there was more of that process. So it's been very, very unusual in the extent of collaboration. Quite unique. But it's very, very much everybody's, which is the whole point.
There's a hand over here. Yeah.
I have a question for the guy with the red forehead. Your name. Could you just talk a little bit about your character or characters and how you approached and how you felt those characters tied together or didn't?
Well, for me, Mr. Mentor is the only character that I play in this whole show. I think he has a bird form, certainly, in that you can first kind of see that with the wings on his back, and that's what I choose him to play, so he can kind of put on that mask at any point that he wants to or needs to. Yeah, he is really trying to drive this idea of Homo Sophia, of finding the truth and that you need to tell it, and also be polite while you're doing it. Just really trying to push her and give her as many tools as she needs, but he's not going to spoon feed her. She needs to do it herself. Find that for herself.
So how did the man in the character in the, and I'm not sure if these were meant to be the same characters or not, how did the man in the laptop shop tie into the man who was there watching the you were like the Grant, you were the money man, right? You were
yeah.
The Grant.
Well, that originally the Freddy Soup guy watching the play, he
were those the same characters or not?
Yeah.
So
that's kind of like a little disguise for him to get into the real world, Sophia's life, and just watch this and see if she's actually done it, if she could actually tell the truth. And he's kind of, in a way, that final test for her, or at least is a physical representation of that final test for her. He's just there as her mentor, as her guide, as her teacher, overseeing it, but he's not going to step in and, again, this is how you do it. He's just there to...
Yeah. One thing I love about both the Clock Woman and Mr. Mentor is the way in which they effortlessly go from being invisible, lurking in the background, no one seems to see them or notice them, to suddenly stepping in, and no one ever says, hey, where did you come from? Or hey, who are you? Suddenly the Clock Woman is assisting in the auditions, and there's no question. It's as if they are whoever they need to be in Sophia's journey, sort of assisting her, guiding her, directing her as she goes. And there's something sort of primal and eternal and strange about them that, we could spend this whole time, I think, talking about, kind of wrap our minds around them and what their function is and what they represent in this thing.
In the hero's journey, which is what's being explained in the little signs, the sort of classical sense of what a story is, they'd be called shapeshifters. They'd be sort of semi-spiritual characters, and they can be real or they can be quasi-spiritual, but they'll do what needs to be done at the moment of necessity to move the central character along and assist them in their journey, or force them to realize something, or force them to take a next step. So that's their job.
What you were just talking about, is that related to any kind of Irish folk or primal, you know what I mean?
It's not specifically
Legend.
Irish folk. I can never remember all the details of the source of this. There's a couple of different people who have written about it. It's called The Hero's Journey, and basically the source was supposed to be a study of myth and legend to try and assess how we understand the story, how we emotionally experience it. So if I tell you a story about when my son was playing soccer last weekend, if it's to be a story, he has to have been challenged and overcome the challenge and succeeded in the end for it to be a story. And the classical stories have all these extra steps included in them, so that you're offered an opportunity. You establish the initial state of the world. There's a challenge set up. The person says, no, I don't want to go to war today. And then the next day they're challenged again, and maybe they might refuse again, and then eventually they cross the threshold, they accept the challenge, and they go on the journey, and they go to the center of the earth, they go to the deepest, darkest place, they follow the goal towards the most need or most desire. And that's what we understand, in a road movie. That's what we understand in most of the Hollywood films you see today are built according to this structure, so that at a certain point certain things happen. You think you've succeeded at the end and you have what you need, and then suddenly there's another challenge. The guy gets up off the floor and he's still alive and he still has the gun in his hand. And so to make the road back, you have to overcome another obstacle and so on. So it's just an effort to break story down into familiar patterns that we can follow and understand.